Welcome. Welcome. Whenever I do this, I just create work for myself because I don't know how to do these settings, but it'll be okay. It'll be okay. What is this? What is this track? This is something. This is something special. I like this one. Welcome everybody. Sorry that I had the thing set to the silly. I had the chat set to this stun. I had the chat set to stun. And the chat's at the stun. I'm just messing with some volume settings. Is that good? Is that looking good? Is that looking good? Yeah, looks like the song is done. Okay. I just have to fiddle with OBS a lot during the course of the stream, but welcome everybody. Welcome to the stream. Tonight we're gonna be reading more of Fire Control Fundamentals, and we're in for a lot. It's a long one. It sure is a long one. And we're on part D. Let me get the thing set up. I wanted to get something to drink because I know I'll need something to drink later. But I'm not a huge concern right now. Let's get that up. Boom. You want me to zoom in, bubbies? I can zoom in. Nobody asked. But I'll zoom in just for you, my special viewer. That's right, just for you. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Let me see something real quick. What does this button do? Give me a second. I'm just gonna try something out real quick. Before I start, let me see what happens if I click this. For me? Yes, for you, Hexus. Welcome everybody. So, how are you all doing tonight? Before we get started, we're putting the Halloween music because it's October. Guess what's only 11 days away? That's right. Guess what's only 11 days away right now? Hopefully there's not an insane delay this time like there was last time. Let me do a test to see how long the delay is. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Okay, there's like a 3 Mississippi delay. Got it. Alright. Thanksgiving? You're wrong. You're wrong, Eschaton. I'm sorry. You're just plain wrong. You're eating chili and having a good time? That rocks. Awesome sauce. Let us see. Oh, got so much stuff on my desk. So, we're on part D, which, this is in cursive, and we don't speak cursive on this channel, but it says, hitting a moving target from a moving ship. So we're going to be going back into applied physics right from the get-go, and it's going to suck. The problem of hitting a moving target from a moving ship. When an enemy ship is sighted... Oh, I need to add my little marker to the screen. How did I forget? What does this even say right now? Actually, this is like exactly what I needed to say. Cool. You can go right there. Isn't that perfect? I like this track. It's like it's basically the World of Warship soundtrack. Just a second, let me move you. Oh, does it say what the track is? Or is something scary happening? Did I show something somehow? Let me check. Okay, it says what the track is. Yeah, I like this track. Nice. Let me just make sure I have everything on the right monitor. Okay. So, when an enemy ship is sighted and comes within range, it is the job of fire control to solve the fire control problem so that your ship's guns can hit the target. If the enemy were obliging enough to remain in one place and your ship were also brought to a stop, the required elevation and traverse gun settings can be determined by considering only the factors of interior and exterior ballistics for fixed gun and target discussed on the preceding sheets. No enemy ship would be foolish enough to remain still under fire. However, and your own ship doesn't want to be a sitting duck for the enemy's fire either. So both the target and your own ship will keep moving during battle. As a result, the target range and bearing are continually changing, necessitating constant changes to gun elevation angle and sight deflection. In order to make the proper corrections, it is necessary to know in what direction and at what speed the target is moving. With this information, it is possible to predict the position the target will occupy after the time of flight of the projectile has elapsed. The gun is then directed so that the projectile will strike the future position of the target you aim ahead. You ever play World of Warships? It's kind of, you know how it is. The corrections involved are similar to those which compensate for the Earth's rotation, but are much more significant and variable. As you can see, it moved a bit. So you gotta change your elevation and some other things. Because as it gets further away, you don't just have to increase elevation. It'll probably say this in like the next page. But as you get further away, you have to aim further ahead as well because the time increases. The problem of hitting him, another factor which must be considered in the fire control problem when both ships are moving is the fact that the velocity of the ship will be imparted to the projectile at the instant of firing and will affect its trajectory. To illustrate this effect, consider the target as standing still and the firing ship in motion. As the gun is fired, the projectile has two velocities, its own one, and that of its own muzzle velocity. IV means muzzle velocity if you weren't here last time or you need a refresher. And that due to the ship's motion. If the ship's velocity is not considered, the projectile will land short, beyond, or to one side of the target, depending on whether the ship is leaving, approaching, or moving toward one side or the other of the target. Thus, the effect of ship's speed and direction on projectile trajectory must be considered to obtain accurate fire. This diagram does a really good job at portraying that. It's hard to do this with like an experiment in person. It's kind of hard to. It's just kind of hard to physically show with the human scale. But basically, if you're running backwards at like 20 miles per hour, somehow imagine you can do that, backpedaling that fast. You're an insane person and you should be on some kind of sports team. And then you throw a football. It's gonna land short if you don't correct for like how you'd have it if you were standing still. It will always land short. I don't know, that's the best I could think of. You guys probably know what I mean. You're good. Right? Right? You guys are good, right? Come on, you gotta be good. Yeah, you guys are good. Let's see. I saw something silly. Who just said, oh. Okay. Yeah? Okay, perfect. A final factor which enters the solution of the fire control problem between moving ships is the fact that the deck which supports the gun is very seldom perfectly level. A moving ship requires that corrections be made to the gun settings to compensate for deck motion. Because if your ship rolls 2 degrees, you're going to be aiming 2 degrees higher. And it's very common that you roll 2 degrees, as it turns out, in practice. This is the diagram that explains that, if you didn't understand. Although the steps involved in the problem solving the fire control problem, this is a new section. Although the steps involved in the solution of the problem of scoring a hit on a moving target from a ship are many, they can be summarized as follows. 1. Determine present target position in relation to own ship. Predict future target position in relation to own ship. That includes your own future position. Actually, no, it only matters from the point of firing. Never mind, I'm wrong with that. Stabilize the various units. 4. Calculate required corrections to gun training elevation. Transmit data to guns. The table below shows what must be known and what equipment is used to solve each of the above listed steps in the fire control problem. So these are all things we've talked about before in the last stream. That's the gun director, which helps with range and bearing. Range keeper, which does a bunch of stuff. The stable vertical, which helps measure distance and stuff, and angles. The range keeper, which keeps range, and all sorts of other systems that make things work. They're complicated and suck. On the following sheets, we will discuss in detail each of the steps in the solution of the problem. You will learn a little about the history behind the various corrections required and how those corrections are calculated. Determining present target position. Present target position is the target's position relative to the owned ship at the instant the guns are fired. To determine the target's present position, we must know its present range and bearing. In good weather, when the target is visible, the optical rangefinder in the gun director is used to determine the range of the target, and the sight telescope in the director is used to measure relative target bearing, the angle between the ship's own center line, and the line of sight. You will learn more about the rangefinder and sight telescope, and how they measure range and bearing in the next section. When the target is obscured by bad weather or night firing, radar is used to track the target and measure its range and bearing. You'll learn in a later section how radar serves in place of optical equipment under poor visibility conditions, and sometimes to the exclusion of optical equipment for certain applications. So what that's implying there is that in certain situations, generally speaking, the doctrine of the U.S. Navy in 1953 is that they prefer to use normal range-keeping technology when possible, and when that isn't really sufficient because of weather or something else, they'll use radar. But sometimes, depending on what the captain wants or whoever's in charge of all that stuff, there's a lot of guys involved there. Whoever's in charge says we're going to use the radar instead or as well, and so the radar gets used. Radar doesn't always work the same. Sometimes optical works better, at least in this period. I think it's a lot more subtle than anything optical these days, to a significant extent. Sidebar, but I suppose finding a solution for torpedoes is somewhat more simplistic, given it being relatively two-dimensional. Well, we are going to get into that, hopefully today. I don't know if we're going to need more streams of this or not, but this music's running a little bit loud. There we go. It's not necessarily more simplistic, because the forces at play are a bit weirder. There's different forces at work, which I'm sure we'll go over, but one of them is the current, which you have to account for, because they will be pushed by the current, unless they're going sufficiently fast, and there is no sufficiently fast. It's not like a airborne projectile that the faster it goes, it just kind of carves through air, because air isn't that dense compared to water. You need to be going like a bajillion miles per hour underwater for the current not to affect you. People don't think of the ocean as having one, but it does. So, generally it is. You don't have to worry about elevation and stuff. You've been watching Wolfpack 345, and honestly blows your mind how easy he does this stuff. Yeah, the people who play those games are like 5 million IQ. I'll play one of them eventually. Eventually. I'm not sure when, but I will. I don't have any at the moment. I considered doing Atlantic Fleet, but it has a certain country's flag in it, so I'm hesitant to say the least. Because that kind of has that, not really, yeah, not at all. I do imagine though that doing all the stuff for that is a lot harder in real life than in a video game because there's a bunch of people doing something versus the computer feeding you all the info some way or another, or suggested info. And there's a lot more that can go wrong in real life than in a U-boat simulator. What did I last read? Oh, the next few sheets discuss how the target's future position is predicted, so that the initial gun settings can be corrected to fire the projectile to the position which the target will occupy at the moment of impact. In order for the target's future position to be accurately predicted, its present position must be known. Thus, determining the target's present position is the first and most basic step in the solution of the fire control problem. So when you have the degree of fine control and knowledge through the visual lens in a game like World of Warships, it's the missile copy pasta but reworded? The missile copy? I think I know what you're talking about. You mean the missile knows where it is? That? So there's the steps. They were like said earlier, I think. And there's a diagram of where all the stuff is. We've seen this diagram before, for the most part. But now we're focusing on the gun director. Yes? Okay, gotcha. It's something like that. When you play like World of Warships, your brain does all this for you because you have control and knowledge that people wouldn't have had in this era and don't have in any situation in practice ever. And it's presented to you in a very easy to digest way. I think one of the reasons why the War Thunder naval battles suck comparatively is to like World of Warships is that they actually take account the motion of your ship and stuff a lot harder than World of Warships does, and people don't know how to correct for that with their brain. Your brain isn't used to correcting for that. Does WoWs give you a lead indicator like War Thunder? No, but you just put your crosshair where your lead is. If that's what you mean. There's no like planes lead indicator in War Thunder naval battles that I'm aware of. There's like a circle above where your stuff is predicted to land. But that's about it. In like arcade. But that's about it. I don't think they give you an exact heading that you would have to like put your target down on. Do you? Do they? Oh my lord, that's a little bit... There we go. Okay. War Thunder arcade. Yeah, it's just like a circle, isn't it? It's not even like the planes where you just aim it. And then that's where your things are gonna get the kill at. Let's assume that the target's position has been determined and that both ships are in motion. If we make all the corrections required to compensate, at least in the air, never really played naval. Ooh. Oh, no. Well, naval doesn't have it. In the air, they have that, but that's also not a thing in World of Warships at this present time. And not in naval. Don't ever play War Thunder naval. It sucks butts. Sucks big, juicy butts. Just a second. Just a second. Just a second. Okay, we're back. So I heard, that's why I avoided it. Exactly. As you should continue doing, my friend. In order Okay, let's assume that the target's present position has been determined, that both ships are in motion. If we make all the corrections required to compensate for the effects of range and deflection, ballistics and deflection ballistics, to fire the guns based on the present position of the target, our projectiles will not hit the target. During the time it takes for the projectiles to travel from the gun to point of impact, the positions of both own ship and target have changed, thus it is necessary to predict where the target will be at the time of impact future target position. In order to predict future position of target, we must know own ship course and speed, as well as the target course and speed. You already know that the own ship's course is obtained from the ship's gyro, and the own ship's speed is obtained from the ship's speedometer log. Target course and speed are obtained by direct observation and estimation at the gun director. The information on own ship and target motion is transmitted to and combined in the range keeper, which calculates future target position. Now we've cleared the second major hurdle in the path to solution of the fire control problem. On the following sheets, we'll go into details of how corrections are made for the motion of own ship and target, and what range rate and linear bearing rate are, and how they're used to predict range and deflection corrections. Here's a math. Predicting future target position, true bearing, and relative bearing. Before we get into the analysis of how own ships and targets' course and speed affect the prediction of future target position, let's get a few definitions straightened out. We'll be talking about relative target bearing, own ship's course and speed, and target's course and speed on the next few sheets. It's important that you understand what each of these terms means and how they're represented. First, let's distinguish between relative target bearing and true target bearing. Target bearing is the angle measured clockwise in a horizontal plane from between the fore and aft axis of own ship and the line of sight. True target bearing is the horizontal angle measured clockwise between the north and south axis and the line of sight. Thus, the direction of own ship motion. This is just explaining what bearing is. This is saying, you know what like, I got your 6. That's your 180. Okay, so if they've got your 9, that's the 270. And if they got your 3, that's your 90. That's a 90-degree bearing. Okay, now that we have that covered, I don't need to read this. This is you guys understand how this works. Own ship's course is the horizontal angle measured clockwise between north and own ship's axis. Own ship's speed is designated so. Target angle. Why are things moving? Target angle is the angle measured clockwise between the fore and aft axis of the target ship and the line of sight. Target speed is simply designated s. These quantities are illustrated below. The important thing to remember is that all these angles are measured clockwise. Depending on the position of own ship and target, their values may vary from 0 to 360 degrees. The method of measuring them, however, never varies. Ooh, is my audio okay? Yeah, that looks like it's bad sick. Okay, I'm trying to see how loud my stuff would be. That's good. It should be like a little whisper in the back. Predicting future target position, correcting for own ship's course and speed. Audio is good? Awesome. You know that own ship's motion affects the solution of the fire control problem, and that both range and deflection are affected depending upon own ship's course and speed. Own ship motion can be represented graphically by a line whose magnitude is so own ship speed. Own ship speed has two effects, that of shortening or lengthening range, and that of deflecting the projectile left or right. Deflection component XO and the range component YO, respectively perpendicular to and along the line of sight, determine the effect of ship movement on the deflection and range of the projectile. I don't math. The maximum effect of own ship motion on range occurs when the ship is either directly approaching or leaving the target. Then YO equals SO, XO equals 0, and BR equals 0 or 180 degrees. The maximum effect of own ship's motion on deflection occurs when the ship's course is perpendicular to its line of sight. And then XO equals SO, YO equals 0, and BR equals 90 or 270 degrees. We're doing calculus on this stream. I never took a calc class. I never took calculus. Oh man, I need chocolate. I need chocolate for this. I need some chocolate. I need 2 chocolates. Give me 2 chocolates. Yo, can any of you drive me to the store? I need to get some Pokemon cards while I'm taking my little chocolate break. I'm eating some Dove Halloweeny milk chocolates. Mmm. You like that? You guys like that? Good chocolate. Mmm. Okay. Mmm. ASMR. You guys got trolled. This is the ASMR stream. You got pranked. Face the fact. Just deal with it. Oh. Jay Bavlin Pokemon card. Is that in the new set? Is that where they ended up putting it? Or is it not available for like retail at all? At least yet. I know he's in the album. I know Lil Yachty is in the album. Because right before the stream, I was in a little voice chat with Tomakeys and stuff, and Tomakeys was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna listen to this album. It's got all these people, and it sounds like it'll be horrible." The new Pokemon 25 album not available. What a shame. Okay, if you multiply YO by TF, the time of flight of the projectile. I do know, but I do know there's a post-do one, and it's probably not available either. Then what a shame. If you multiply YO by TF, the time of flight of the projectile, and affix the correct sign, minus if YO is toward the target, plus if YO is away from the target, you have the correction to range due to the own ship movement, neglecting air resistance. Similarly, the value of the linear deflection would be XOTF. Air resistance is corrected for by multiplying by a factor of less than 1, so that the actual corrections for range and deflection will be less than YOTF and XOTF. When a ship moves in still air, it cuts through the air and creates a headwind which is equal and opposite to the own ship's speed. This is Newton's first law, I think? Maybe? I think? Yeah. Because you're pushing on the air, so the air pushes back, right? When a ship moves in still air, cuts through the air, creates a headwind which is equal and opposite to own ship's speed. Thus, when a projectile is fired into still air from a moving ship, in addition to all other forces acting on it, headwind will affect its trajectory. When true atmospheric wind is present, it also acts on the projectile during its flight. Headwind and true wind combine to form a resultant wind called apparent wind. There's that. The component of apparent wind velocity across the line of fire is the apparent crosswind. The component of apparent wind along the line of fire is opposite the apparent range wind. In the previous section, you learned about the effects of gun elevation and train of range and crosswinds, respectively, for fixed gun and target. The effects are the same when own ship is in motion, but apparent cross and range winds must be used in computation of corrections to elevation angle EG and sight deflection DS. Predicting future target position, correcting for target course and speed. Target motion can be treated in exactly the same way as own ship motion. The target motion has a magnitude S, target speed, and direction A, target angle. S has the same effect on range as SO, and is broken down into components along... Is my stream broken? Okay, stream isn't broken. Along as SO, and is broken down into components long and perpendicular to the LOS in the same manner. The range component is then YT, and deflection component is XT. There's a diagram. The maximum effect of target motion on range occurs when the target is directly approaching or leaving own ship. Then S equals YT, XT equals 0, and A equals 0 or 180 degrees. I don't even remember what A is. The maximum effective target motion on deflection occurs when the target's course is perpendicular to the line of sight. Then s equals xt, yt equals 0, and a equals 90 or 270 degrees. Oh, angle, right, I'm stupid. As for own ship's motion, the correction to range due to target motion, neglecting air resistance, equals yttf. If yt is toward own ship and the correction is negative, if yt is away from own ship, the correction is positive. In the same manner, the linear deflection correlation is xttf. These results must be manipulated by a factor to correct for air resistance so that the actual corrections to range and deflection due to target motion will be slightly less than yttf and xttf. And thank God that computers exist. All this stuff is being explained anyway, because you need to know this as a fire controlman. However, a computer does all the work. A mechanical computer, mind you, in this period. Thanks, computer, for making this less horrible. Hangy's computer book. Hybrid Life Hoss 956. It's been a while. It's been a while. How am I this fine evening? I'm doing awesome. No, this guy's legit. This guy's legit, Joker. He has sub emotes, bro. This guy watches VTubers. I'm doing awesome. Hoss is real. This guy's awesome. I'm having a great night. I just ate some chocolate. I'm just reading calculus without thinking too hard about it, so I don't hurt my head. That's just kind of what the stream is right now. Make me say something. Praise be to Hoss Bots. This guy's pretty based. I'm thinking this guy's based. Is it like a parody account? If I remember his story correctly, he got drunk and changed his name, or he lost a bet and changed his username. And so he's Hoss. One of the two. He said it when he first came here. Blessed. You're welcome. You're welcome, Bubby. I'm having a great night. Yes, I was right. Hoss VTuber with Booba? Based. 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 Do it. That'd be so based. Now that own ship and target speeds have resolved into components along and across the line of sight, these components can be combined to find a relative motion between ship and target in range and deflection. The amount which range changes in a unit of time, the time rate of change of range, is called range rate across the line of sight, dr. It is equal to the sum of yo and yt. dr equals yo plus yt. Range rate dr may be positive or negative depending on the value and sign of yo and yt. Thus, in the illustration below, if yo were decreasing range at 2 yards per second and yt were decreasing range at 4 yards per second, dr would equal -2 plus -2 plus -4, or dr equals -6 yards per second. However, if yo were at increasing range at 4 yards per second, moving away from the target, and yt were decreasing at 2 yards per second, dr would equal +2 plus -2, or dr equals +2 yards per second. Thus, dr is positive if range is increasing, when yo equals yt is plus, and dr is negative when range is decreasing, when yo plus yt is minus. Yeah. The amount in which bearing changes, measured as a change in linear distance at the target per unit time, is called linear bearing rate, RDBS, and is equal to the sum of XO and XT. RDBS equals XO plus XT. Linear bearing rate, RDBS, is considered positive if it tends to increase the relative target bearing angle, BR, and negative if it tends to decrease BR. In the illustration below, both XO and XT tend to increase BR, so that XO equals +4 and XT equals +2. They're getting closer. Hence, RDBS equals +4 plus +2 equals +6. The linear bearing rate is converted to an angular change in bearing dBs, and by dividing by the range r. Ugh. This is good music for this horrible calculus segment. What song is this again? Pipe Organ of Zeobiscus Church by Justinus Zapola. Yeah, that fits. However, if XO tended to decrease BR and XT tended to increase BR, as below where XO plus equals -3 and XT equals +2, RDBS would equal -3 plus 2, where RDBS equals -1 yards per second, and the relative target angle BR would be decreasing. Again, angular bearing rate must be determined and depends on the range R. Thus, the linear bearing rate RDBS may be either positive or negative depending on relative motion of the ship and target across the line of sight. You guys following? I hope you guys are following. Give me just a second. I gotta do my arm stretch. Ooh. Ah. Ooh, good back crack. Good back crack. Back crack. What is this song? It's like actually Halloween music. Okay. Since the range is changing at a rate equal to dr and the projectile remains in the air for a time of flight tf, the total change in range due to relative target motion during projectile flight will be RT equals dr x tf. You guys care about this? I don't think you guys care about this part. This is like, let's just sight deflection. There's visual stuff going on. More calculus. Ugh. Review of corrections required to predict future target position. Here we go. This is a good segment. Wow! That may very well be your reaction to the preceding sheets. You can say that again. How can I ever remember all those corrections and how to make them? Well, don't worry about it. You're not, as we said before, expected to become a ballistics expert, and you're not expected to remember how to make all the corrections you've just read about. It will be your job aboard ship to maintain and operate the fire control equipment, which makes the corrections automatically for you. Huh? What do you want to say? What do you want to say, Joker? You're only expected to realize that corrections must be made for accurate gunfire and to have some idea of what those corrections are. Flying a plane is a lot easier than all that. Do you want me to have... I'm going to find a plane flying manual, because it's actually not that different in some ways. It's just, you do a lot more of it by eye. In this period, at least. You do all the same stuff. You literally do, like, all the same stuff. Minus, like, accounting for wind for your bullets. As a fighter pilot. You do, like, the same stuff. In fact, you become both the ship and the projectile when you're the airplane. And then you have to worry about all the other plane stuff. You gotta know a lot of stuff as a pilot. Bane? Thus why it's easier. I guess. This job is a lot easier, though, because, as they said, you just need to kind of get it. The computer does all the work, like I said earlier. You just need to know what the computer does, so you don't say, "What is this magic machine in front of me?" Let's summarize the steps required to correct for own ship and target motion, and let's predict future target position. So here's the inputs, and then you get sight angle and sight deflection from the rangefinder. Now that you have some appreciation as to how future target position is predicted, let's go on and see how the third step in the solution of the fire control problem is solved, that of stabilizing the various units. Here's the various units. Now we got the stable vertical. Now we come to the third step in the solution of the fire control problem, We have determined present target position and predicted future target position. It would seem that all we need to do is calculate the required gun elevation and train, position the guns, and fire. This would be the case for a shore installation, or if our ship's deck was perfectly horizontal. You ready for more math? But we are considering the problem of firing a gun from a moving ship, and the deck of a moving ship is very seldom perfectly level. Roll and pitch of the ship requires that the stable vertical measure level and cross level. In order to stabilize the various units and provide a reference plane from which the gun elevation and train angles can be measured. What are roll and pitch, level and cross level? You'll find out all about them on the following sheets. So here's roll. Roll is side to side, pitch is forward and back. There's also like yaw, but I don't think ships have yaw. Hey, roll and pitch. Words I actually recognize for once. Yes. Ships pitch. The conditions in which these things happen is a bit different than planes, but I think you get that. Stabilizing the various units. Roll and pitch. Oh my lordy. Under normal conditions of operation, the ship's deck is not horizontal, as it has been considered until now. Wind and ocean currents and the forward motion of the ship impart a rolling motion to the ship. This motion can be resolved into two motions. One, roll, rotation of the ship from side to side in a plane perpendicular to the deck through the ship's sides. And two, pitch, rotation of the ship from bow to stern in a plane perpendicular to the deck through the ship's axis. These two motions and the planes in which they are measured are shown below. And there's a really complicated diagram that just explains it if you're super stupid. Normally, the motion of a ship at sea is such that both roll and pitch are present, but regardless of how the deck moves, its motion can always be resolved into roll and pitch. Y'all would just be turning the boat. Yeah. You're right. But that matters. That does actually matter for firing the guns. It's just something I don't think they talked about, since usually you're not turning while shooting the guns. Ooh, toe crack. Normally the motion of a ship at sea is such that both roll and pitch are present. I think I already said that. I like this ship in this drawing. The ship is shown up a lot, and I like it a lot. It's just like a rifled muzzle loader RMF, like 11-inch RMF gun on like this tiny little ship with a transom. Where's the pilot house? The ship doesn't have a pilot house. How do they drive it? What the heck? In order to illustrate the effect of roll and pitch on the solution of the fire control problem, let's start the ship's deck horizontal. You know how that to correct for wind drift, relative target motion, etc., the gun bore axis must be elevated above the line of sight and traverse right or left. These angles are sight angle and sight deflection, respectively. A gun mounted on the deck must move with the deck, and if roll and pitch cause the ship to move so that the deck is no longer horizontal, the line of fire will no longer occupy the same position with respect to the line of sight, which is fixed between gun and target. Uh-oh. Incorrect. If no adjustments were made to the gun train and elevation, sight angle and sight deflection will change continuously as long as the ship rolled and pitched. But in order to score a hit, we know that the VS and DS must equal the value calculated by the range keeper. We must continuously correct gun elevation and train to maintain the correct values of VS and DS, thus keeping the gun bore axis in its original position regardless of how the ship's deck may move due to roll and pitch. Here's how we stabilize. Before we can adjust gun elevation and train to correct for the effects of roll and pitch, we must be able to measure the deck's inclination. In addition, since the guns can train only in the deck plane and elevate only in a plane perpendicular to the deck, we must convert deck inclination measurement to angles in these two planes. If we were to use roll and pitch to measure deck tilt, a variation in either would affect both gun elevation and train. To simplify the computation of required corrections to gun elevation and train, the deck's inclination is measured for fire control purposes in terms of level and cross level. Level is the component of deck motion in a plane perpendicular to the deck for the line of sight. Cross level is a component of deck motion in a vertical plane perpendicular to the line of sight. Huh? You will learn on the following sheets how level and cross level affect gun elevation and train. So now we have quadrants. We have planes. We have so many planes. In order that you may understand more easily the measurement and effects of level and cross level, we will consider that the deck moves in such a way that only one is present at a time. If roll and pitch of the ship cause the deck to move only in a plane perpendicular to the deck through the line of sight as shown in the three illustrations on the right, only level is present. The level angle L is measured in this plane between the deck plane and the horizontal plane, in which the line of sight lies for surface targets. Although level angle is defined as the angle between the horizontal and the deck in the level plane, for fire control purposes it is measured by the stable vertical as the angle between the true vertical and perpendicular to the deck and the level plane. Because the guns elevate in a plane perpendicular to the ship's deck, level angle can be corrected for simply by elevating or depressing the guns, as you will see on the next sheet. So that's pretty simple. That's like the easiest thing to fix. In order to fire a projectile the desired distance, the elevation of the gun above the horizontal angle, EG, which is just elevation. That's just what EG means. It's an easy one to remember. Must remain constant regardless of the inclination of the ship's deck. The value of EG required to attain a given range is determined by applying ballistic corrections previously discussed. The elevation of the guns, however, is more conveniently measured with reference to the deck plane. Thus, as motion of the ship in level causes the deck plane to move with respect to the horizontal, the level angle L must be continuously added to or subtracted from elevation to obtain the required gun elevation order, e.g. elevation of the guns above the deck plane. Yeah. Motion of the ship in level, then, affects only the elevation of the guns. Corrections are made for the effects of level simply by elevating or depressing the guns through the level angle L, thus adjusting EG to keep EG constant. E apostrophe G means like the other elevation thing. I don't know, it's Thanks, computer. Guys, can we get a thanks, computer, in chat? We need to thank the computer. If the roll and pitch of the ship cause the deck to move only in a vertical plane perpendicular to the line of sight, gyroscope go brrrr. Thanks, computer. The line of sight is shown in the three illustrations on the right, only cross level is present. The cross level angle ZH is measured in this plane between the deck and the horizontal plane. As was true for level angle, cross level angle is defined as the angle between the horizontal and the deck in the cross level plane. But for fire control purposes, cross level is measured between the true vertical, established by the stable vertical, and the perpendicular to the deck plane. You will learn in a later section how stable vertical measures level and cross level. Errors resulting from the effects of cross level are not as easily corrected as those produced by level, as you'll see on the following sheet. Just as EG must remain constant regardless of the deck motion, slight deflection DS must remain the same for accurate fire. Level angle does not affect DS, but cross level does. When the deck rotates through the angle ZH, the position of the gun barrel is shifted as shown and below, resulting in changes in gun elevation and deflection. The LOF line of fire is depressed, and in the case illustrated is deflected to the right. So obviously because the gun does not have a full range of motion like an actual gun would, you can't just turn it to the left and have it easily go to the same place. It's just kind of an eternal problem. You can change it by rotating, but it still doesn't work as good. Especially if there's more than one gun in the mounting, which is frequently the case in the US Navy. Both gun elevation and train must be adjusted to correct this error. The gun must be traversed in the deck plane and then depressed in a plane perpendicular to the deck until the gun barrel is restored to its original position. Thus, cross level affects both gun train and elevation, while level affects only elevation. Normally, of course, both level and cross-level are introduced as the ship rolls and pitches. Thus, the total corrections to gun train and elevation orders must be the sum of the adjustments required to correct for the efforts of level and cross-level individually. You can see that these corrections are important, particularly in a heavy sea. For every change in the position of the ship's deck with respect to the horizontal, there must be a corresponding change in gun orders to compensate for the change in level and cross-level. It is the job of the stable vertical to measure level and cross-level continuously and transmit this information to the range keeper, which computes the required changes in gun orders. Thus, the stable vertical supplies the answer to the third step in the solution of the fire control problem. Just a second. Just checking some stuff. Just a second. Okay. I read this, right? Did I read this? I just tabbed out for a second. Did I read this? This is Call of Duty Zombies? Oh, it's from Halloween. Did I read this yet? I'm gonna assume I read this. We might pause here for a moment and take a look at our progress in reaching the solution to the fire control problem. We've completed the first 3 steps in the solution. We've located the target and determined its present position, step 1. We've predicted the target's future position, step 2, and we've measured level and cross-level at the stable vertical to stabilize the system, step 3. Our progress is indicated below, and is tied in with the equipment utilized to accomplish each step in the solution. On completion of step 3, in the solution, all quantities necessary for the solution of the problem have been measured. The only thing remaining is to be done is the calculation of corrections required using the measured quantities and transmission of the data to the guns. Let's go on and see how this is done. Now that we have found all the quantities necessary for the solution of the fire control problem by solving the first 3 steps, we must convert this information into gun train and elevation orders. It is of no use to determine level angle or target speed unless the guns can be aimed in such a way as to correct for these and the other factors of the problem. So it is necessary to calculate corrections to gun train and elevation from the data obtained by completing the first 3 steps. These data are fed, together with information on the range and deflection ballistics discussed in the preceding section, into the range keeper, which utilizes various mechanisms to calculate the required corrections to gun elevation and train. You will learn more about the range keeper and how it works in the next section. On completion of step 4, calculation of corrections go to gun train and elevation. We've actually completed the solution of the fire control problem. The remaining step, that of transmitting the data to the guns, is not a problem in the sense of having to measure or calculate any further values. Nevertheless, we must continue it as a step in the overall fire control problem, for if no means are provided for transmission of gun orders from range keeper to turrets, what value would there be in the first 4 steps? So let's see how the gun orders are transmitted to the guns. Now it's time for the payoff. The various components of the fire control system have performed their functions. All the measuring and calculating are completed, and it's time to direct the guns in accordance with orders received from the range keeper. Various means are available for transmitting gun orders from the range keeper to the guns, and depending on the type of ship, the battle situation, the method of fire control being employed, any one or combination of these transmission systems may be used. The various methods include 1. Electrical synchro and servo systems, 2. Mechanical linkages, and 3. Telephoned verbal orders. Some guy calls the phone. It's a little drawing. I love the guy where they draw these little dudes' faces. Synchro and servo systems may be used to actually position the guns in response to the rangekeeper outputs, or may position indicating devices which inform the gunners of the proper gun settings. The mechanical linkage and telephone systems are secondary or auxiliary systems, which also inform the gunners of the required elevation and train angles. These systems for transmission of information are also used to link the other units of the fire control system, the director, stable vertical, and range keeper. Their function here is just as vital as the transmission of the final gun orders, for the gun orders could not be determined if any one of the fire control system components were cut off from the others. It may have seemed like a long, complicated procedure, and we must admit that it isn't a simple job, but at least we have reached the end. At last, we have reached the end. Just kidding, there's more to this book. We've located the target and determined its present position, but we've predicted the target's future position, stabilized the various units, calculated the corrections required to gun train and elevation, and finally, we've transmitted the gun orders to the guns. We've completed the 5 steps in the solution of the fire control problem, and all that remains to be done is to fire the guns. Same thing you've seen a million times. We've calculated the fire control problem for our purposes of explaining its solution as one isolated problem. It must be remembered, however, that conditions are constantly changing during combat. Own ship and target course and speed, wind level, and cross levels, as well as other factors, are constantly changing value. So the fire control system must continuously solve the problem, taking account of the varying conditions. This it does amazingly, and provides continuously changing gun orders which keep the guns properly aimed regardless of any change in one or all of the factors affecting the problem solution. Other factors affecting accuracy. Now you have found out about almost all the factors which enter into the solution of the surface fire control problem. In earlier sections you studied interior and exterior ballistics and the problem of hitting a fixed target from a fixed position. In this section you have learned about the additional factors which must be considered when owned ship and target are moving. There are certain factors which affect the accuracy of fire which do not properly fall into the classification of interior or exterior ballistics. These are functions of the particular ship in question, combat conditions, and/or the skill of the operating personnel. The fire control and gunnery systems on a large ship are very complex and contain many mechanical and electrical devices used to solve the fire control problem. Aim and fire the guns. This equipment must be kept in good working order, properly lined and accurately calibrated. Malfunction of or lost motion in this equipment can cause serious errors in setting the guns in elevation and train so as to score a hit. Your responsibility in keeping the fire control equipment functioning properly is very important in order to keep errors due to the malfunction equipment to the absolute minimum. Another factor which affects the accuracy of fire is the skill of operating personnel. The gunnery and fire control equipment is only as useful as the operators are skillful in using it. Here, too, it will be your job to operate the fire control equipment effectively to keep human errors to the absolute minimum. Combat conditions also affect accuracy of fire. All the most elaborate equipment in the fleet will be useless unless the target can be located and its course and future position accurately determined. Evasive tactics by the enemy, therefore, often reduce the accuracy of fire. Ooh. So if they turn away, you're gonna miss. You ever play World of Warships? It happens in there all the time, with destroyers especially. From the importance of spotting. From your study of interior and exterior ballistics, you'll recall that not all the factors which affect the flight of the projectile can be precisely evaluated in advance of firing. Some deviation from the predicted fall of the projectile is to be expected, even with the best fire control equipment available. Experienced gun crews and efficient fire control personnel. Thus, it is entirely possible that the first shots fired may not hit the target. So it is not enough to track the target, operate the fire control equipment, and direct the guns according to the computed gun settings required. The most carefully calculated settings may result in a projectile missing the target. If you were to sit back and assume that you were hitting the target because you had made all the adjustments and calculations very carefully, you'd probably score many more misses than hits. It is essential that the fall of each round be observed so it can be determined whether the projectiles are falling beyond, short, or to one side of the target. Corrections can be applied to gun elevation and deflection to cause the projectiles to land on the target. This procedure for observing where projectiles land and making connections to the gun settings for subsequent rounds in order to score hits is called spotting. It is noted that the first round fired falls short and to the right of the target. Despite all corrections to compensate for interior exterior ballistics and the relative motion of the ship and target, the guns must be elevated and traverse to the left. If this adjustment results in a hit, fine, but the second round may fall beyond the target, in which case the elevation angle must be reduced. Thus, spotting is a continuous process during combat, and the final correction of the gun settings to compensate for errors which cannot be evaluated prior to firing. You guys enjoying the read? I'm going to get water in a little bit. So we get to adjust, and maybe we'll hit the second time. Or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth. Hydrate? Okay. Let me set up a BRB screen. I will be right back in like 2 minutes.
In years, I have returned.
Just kidding, it's me, Sorrel. Just kidding, haha. Ha ha ha, just kidding. You guys been okay while I was gone? You guys alright? Anything scary happen? Anything spooky? You frightened? I hope you weren't scared while I was gone. Things seem silly afoot. Ooh. Yeah, we're popping out the kettle corn for this one. We're popping out the kettle corn. Okay. Ooh. Picture yourself on the deck of a modern warship, charged with the responsibility of directing the ship's gunfire. The target is visible on the horizon, and it is up to you to tell the gunner how he must elevate and train the guns in order to score a hit on the enemy. You are familiar with the corrections which must be applied, and you know how they are calculated. Suppose you determine range and bearing by eye, and you must correct but for drift, wind, air resistance, Earth's curvature, and rotation of the Earth. You must determine the correct course, protect the future position, allow for your own ship's motion, predict future range and deflection, correct for level and cross level. And work rapidly. And after a half hour or so, you come up with the answer. Because you're doing this incredibly difficult calculus. The only difficulty is that by the time the target has either disappeared or blown you out of the water. We got a cartoon. We got a fun cartoon. Oh, this is Scooby-Doo music. No, the solution of the fire control problem cannot be reached rapidly nor accurately enough to obtain effective gunfire. Has to help with various fire control instruments and related equipment. If it were not... Oi! Ship boy! That's your first message in my chat? Hello. What's up? Sorry to call you out for that, by the way. Oops. Neo says hi for the amazing art I did of Neo. Tell Neo is welcome for the Neo art of Neo. Or something. That's a tongue twister. Say it 10 times fast, bro. Neo's welcome. Oh. I'm eating cow corn. Also, it would have been something else. What do you mean? Like last time I was here, Twitch wasn't fucking up. Your first message. Oh, gotcha. I understand. No problem, bro. Yum. No. The solution to the fire control problem cannot be reached. Literally couldn't comment on the epic DBZ jump. That's so sad. That was such a good stream, bro. That's so sad. What a great stream. If we're not for the gun director, rangefinder, stable, vertical, and other auxiliary devices and their cross connection. Anyway, have fun. Back to Deader Space. Bye-bye. Corrections involved in setting the guns for accurate fire would have been tamed or a hit or miss method of gunfire employed. This would hardly be suitable in modern warfare, where ultimate target can't be seen, where the first round is an important one. So the fire control equipment you will learn about on the subsequent sheets is all important for the effective operation of your ship in combat. Why basic mechanisms and electrical circuits are necessary. Some more popcorn for my mouthful. That's my hair. What are you doing in there? Let's close this off. Snack time is over. 1 second, I gotta take a sippy. Why basic mechanisms and electrical circuits are necessary. We're almost done this section. We're almost done on section E, which is torpedoes, I think. You have seen that it would be next to impossible to solve the fire control problem effectively without the help of fire control instruments and equipment. The measurements and computations involved are too many and too complex. You might ask, how does fire control equipment solve the problem? What's inside? A mathematical genius? There's a tiny little man stuffed inside every single fire control computer ever built. That's a fact. The government doesn't want you to know. They might shut down the stream now that I said it. No, even a mathematical wizard. Wizard is the level above genius, according to the US Navy. Keep that in mind for later, okay? Couldn't calculate and measure fast enough to be of use in directing your ship's gunfire. Fire control equipment, like most complex machinery, is composed of simple component mechanisms and electrical circuits. Various component mechanisms can add, subtract, multiply, or divide numbers. Other devices solve vector and component problems. Still others record, transmit, interpret, convert, or retain information. There are other devices which measure required quantities with a high degree of precision. All these functions are performed continuously within the fire control equipment. All these basic mechanisms and circuits are tied together. When operating as an integrated unit, give the answers to the fire control problem almost instantaneously. Thus, the component devices together make up a piece of the equipment, and various pieces of equipment operating together form the fire control system, which acts as the brain for your ship's guns. Well, that math is blowing his mind. That's what happened to me when I see all those calculus terms. Review. Now that you know what factors are involved in solving the problem of hitting a moving target from a moving ship, and why fire control equipment and devices are required to solve the problem. The function of each of the major components of a typical fire control system is probably more clear to you now than it was when it was introduced earlier in these sheets. Let's take another look at the simplified diagram of a typical system and review how each component fits into the picture. There's a handwritten note right here. Electromagnetic something measuring device. Oh, speed. Thanks, handwritten note. The one handwritten note on these diagrams. Most of this is just retyped, so there's probably other notes that are just not there. Cat scream. I love these guys, like you wouldn't believe. They're enthusiastic, but they're really confused. It's a very strange expression. Like they're like, yeah, I like it, but I don't get it. As shown in the diagram on the preceding sheet, the gun director measures present target range, bearing, course, and speed. This information is continuously transmitted to a range keeper. By combining this information with own ship's course from ship's gyro and speed from pedometer log, the range keeper is able to correct for the motion of own ship and target, and thus predict future range and deflection. True wind speed and direction are also supplied to the range keeper, which combines this with information on wind caused by own ship's motion and computes the corrections required for the efforts of apparent wind. The stable vertical measures level and cross level and transmits this information to the range keeper so that the necessary corrections to gun train and elevation can be computed. On the preceding sheets, you have seen what corrections to gun elevation and train orders are required to achieve accurate fire. Here you review the function of each component of a typical fire control system. And let's go on to learn more about how each of the major components of a fire control system works. Ooh. We're not out yet. We're not out of hell yet. What is this monster noise song? By the time you are undoubtedly well acquainted with the major components of a fire control system, the gun's director, rangefinder, stable vertical, and gun turrets, you have seen what the function of each is and how the units are tied together. You know what the basic input to and output from each component is, but you may be wondering how each component works. How does the gun director measure range and bearing? How does the stable vertical measure level and cross level? How does the range keeper compute corrections to range and deflection? You know what each component does, and you know why it does so. The purpose of the next few sheets is to tell you generally how the director measures range, how the range keeper makes calculations, and how the stable vertical measures tilt. Let's take a look inside a typical gun director and see what makes it tick. Gun directors vary widely in size, construction, and appearance depending on their application. For instance, the director for a battery of 16-inch guns bears little obvious similarity to the director used to control 40mm anti-aircraft guns. But however different in size and appearance, most gun directors contain the same major components. The most important of these components is the radar equipment, which is used to determine both range and bearing of targets. In the event of failure of the radar system, optical equipment in the director is used to determine present target position. The rangefinder measures range, the sight telescopes fix the line of sight, and hence determine target bearing and elevation. The optical equipment, however, can only be used under good conditions of visibility. There's like two dudes and they sit in here. Time for bed, have a good one, Sorrel. Have a good night, Joker. I think we'll finish this page and we'll save the rest for another stream. In some fire control systems, the rangefinder may be eliminated and a radar antenna mounted on the gun mount. In this case, range determination is always made by means of radar. You'll learn more about fire control radar in a later section. Right now, let's see how the optical instruments work. Let me take a sip. Looks like we're going to need to do more streams of this book. A typical rangefinder consists of a long tube containing optical and mechanical devices which enable it to be focused on the target. Lines of sight travel from the target to each of two windows located one at each end of the rangefinder and are reflected to the observer's eyepiece. The line of sight is bent down into a tube and into the observer's eye by means of prisms. A prism is the triangular block of glass which can bend light rays in a manner very similar to a mirror. You know that in order to see an object clearly, you must focus both eyes on it, and that you must change the position of your eyes to focus clearly on objects at various distances from your eyes. This is the principle utilized in the rangefinder to measure the distance to the target. By measuring the angle formed between the lines of sight to the target and from each end of the rangefinder when the target is clearly in focus, the range can be determined. Although the rangefinder actually measures this angle, it is calibrated to read range to the target directly in yards. Actual rangefinders are, of course, much more complicated than indicated above, but in basic principle, they are all the same. The gun director also houses the trainer's sight telescope and the pointer's sight telescope, as shown as the illustration on sight sheet 5.2. We were back there already. The trainer's sight telescope is used to measure the angle between the ship's center line and the director's line of sight. This angle is called director train BR and is measured clockwise from the ship's bow. The trainer keeps the vertical crosshair of his telescope centered on the target, thus providing a continuous measurement of director train BR. The pointer sight telescope measures the vertical angle between the line of sight and a reference plane parallel to the ship's deck. This angle is called director elevation EB. The pointer keeps the horizontal crosshair of his telescope centered on the target and thus provides a continuous measurement of direction and elevation EB. Director elevation EB and director train BR, together with range R, determined by the rangefinder, are three basic quantities required for the solution of the fire control problem. They are continuously and automatically supplied to the rangekeeper by the gun director. In surface fire, where the line of sight is considered to be horizontal, director elevation becomes a measure of level. EB is ordinarily disregarded in surface fire since the level is corrected forward by the stable vertical. 2 pages missing. How the stable vertical measures level. Suppose that the ship is originally in the level position shown on the preceding sheet. If the ship moves in such a way that the level is introduced, the level and cross-level gimbals, umbrella, and supporting parts will tilt for the right level angle, L. But the gyro and its attached magnet will remain vertical as shown below. I think we missed a couple steps. As the umbrella coils cut the magnetic lines, Sorrel, don't blink if Atropa has kidnapped you and is grooming you now. I don't think I get a choice on whether or not I blink. I don't have that. This isn't live 2D, this is a PNG. I don't have any foot pedals. I can't blink. Oh no. Oh no. It's okay. You'll save me? Thank you. Thank you, Gondola. My hero clad in brown fur. Read the previous thing? Yeah. As the umbrella coils cut the magnetic lines of force produced by the gyro's magnet, a voltage is induced in the coils. But not right now? Okay. Don't worry, you've got time. You have work tomorrow? Okay. You got plenty of time, Bubby. Which acts on the motor geared to the level gimbal and rotates it about its pivots, restoring the level gimbal and other tipping parts to a horizontal position. In so doing, the level gimbal is rotated through and measures a level angle L, which measurement is transmitted continuously to the rangekeeper so that the corrections previously described can be made to gun elevation. Sure. Now suppose that the ship moves only in cross level. The gimbals, umbrella, and tipping parts will move as shown below, but will blah 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 blah. Boring. Computing devices. Here we go. So far in your study of how fire control equipment works, how are you doing tonight, Gondola? Forgot to ask. Oh, goodness me. Oh, goodness me. Ugh. Just a second while I wait for your response. One second. Okay, how are you doing tonight, Gondola? I'm back now. So far in your study of how fire control equipment works, you've learned about the gun, director, and stable vertical. The remaining component, the rangekeeper, is the most complicated and may appear to you as the most mysterious, because it's a computer. Nobody knows how computers work. Some say computers are still unknown to science. The range keeper. There's something in my teeth. The range keeper is not a simple instrument, but like all complex machines, it is composed of simple component parts. We will not attempt in these sheets to give a complete detailed description of the range keeper and all of its many operations. We will only attempt to give you an idea of 1, what basic computer devices make up a typical rangefinder, and 2, how these computing devices work. The 5 basic computing devices used in a range keeper are 1, the differential, 2, the cam, 3, the component solver, 4, the integrator, and 5, the multiplier. These don't exist anymore because we have computers now, real ones, for the most part. On the following sheets, each of these devices will be briefly described and their operating principle discussed. It would be impossible to explain the details of their construction and operation, and the many variations of these mechanisms in these few sheets will not attempt to do so. You'll learn the details of operation later in your course on fire control basic mechanisms. Ooh, a differential. Oh no, differentials. A differential is a mechanism which can add and subtract numbers. It adds the total revolutions of 2 shafts, or subtracts the total revolutions of 1 shaft from the total revolutions of another shaft. It delivers the answer by positioning a 3rd shaft. Will add or subtract any number of revolutions or fractions of single revolutions continuously and accurately. Shown below is a simplified diagram of a differential, showing the principal parts. When both input gears turn in the same direction, they turn the spider and hence the output gear in that direction and add the 2 inputs. When the input gears turn in opposite directions, the spider and hence the output gear will turn in the direction of the largest input by the amount equal to the difference in parts. Non-linear function. Simplified components. You can actually see this on the fire control equipment. If you go to like a museum, a battleship museum, we're just gonna here we go. In this section, you learn a little more about the components. Yeah, we're just skipping that because that's not. Is that interesting to anyone? Not to me. Not to me. In this section, you learned a little more about the components of a fire control system. You took a quick look at the inside of a gun director, a stable vertical, and a range keeper. Should have a good idea how they work. Such terms such as cross-level gimbal, differential, and integrator should be familiar, and although you may not know the details of the construction of such fire control equipment components, you do know what they are, how they work, and what piece of equipment they're used in, and their functions. Until now, we have been considering general fire control equipment. We have discussed the various elements of a fire control system without relating them to a specific application aboard ship. In the following succeeding sections, you will learn about the application of the general principles and system components discussed here and in the preceding sections. Since we have considered so far only surface fire control, the logical thing to do next is to start studying applications by considering main battery fire control systems which are used to control surface fire. A typical main battery system. The components of a typical main battery system. This is a long one, so this might actually be the real last one, if it's not too mathy. Main battery fire control systems in battleships and cruisers are designed primarily to solve the surface fire control problem which we have been discussing. The anti-aircraft fire control problem involves certain factors which are not involved in the surface problem, and the 2 types of fire control systems somewhat vary in design but not in principle. In the next section, we will discuss the anti-aircraft fire control problem and the equipment used for its solution. Although the present trend is towards development of automatic major caliber guns and fire control equipment capable of handling either the surface or the air problem, the great majority of main battery systems now in use have very limited provisions for anti-aircraft fire. The control of main batteries for fire against aircraft is made possible on most ships by cross connections between the main battery and all-purpose systems. However, because of their complexity, these cross connections will not be discussed in these sheets. There's a lot going on there. In this section, you'll learn more about a typical main battery fire control system, its components, their location, arrangement, and provisions for alternate and emergency methods of operation. The principal components of a typical main battery fire control system. As you already know, I smell something fun. I smell something funny. Something dank is in the air somewhere. They ain't sharing. Someone's not sharing. Someone's not sharing it with me, bro. Not that I would ever. That would be against the law. Don't break the law, kids. Are A, the director, B, rangekeeper, C, stable vertical, D, the turrets. These are located in the following 4 types of stations aboard ship, which are rooms, control stations, gun directors, plotting rooms, and turrets. Each of these 4 types of station is in a position aboard ship where it can best serve its purpose. The control station is located above decks near the gun director and is used by the gunnery officer for observation and supervision. It may be equipped to take over many of the functions of the director and plotting room in an emergency. The gun director is located high above decks so that it may sight and track the target by means of radar or optical equipment. The plotting room is situated well below decks for the maximum protection against enemy fire, since it houses the intricate rangekeeper and stable vertical. The turrets which house the guns are located, of course, above deck and are heavily armored. Each of the 4 types of station will be discussed on the following sheets. So there you go. Plotting room is a big room above the waterline under all the other command stuff. Ooh. Welcome to stream. I see my numbers just jumped up a little bit. How is everybody doing tonight? Whee! We've made a bit of progress by skipping calculus. But there's a lot of this book to go. Just a second. I have a Twitter notice that I will click. Okay, let's just close Twitter now. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Depending on the size and type of ship, there may be 1 or 2 control stations. If there are 2, as shown in the illustrations on the preceding sheet, one is located near the forward director and one near the aft director. Either or both of these stations may be equipped to take over many of the functions of gun directors. 1 second. Ooh. And plotting room in an emergency or during auxiliary or secondary fire control, which you will learn about later. On the other hand, the control stations may serve merely as supervision and observation stations for the gunnery officer. In either case, the stations contain equipment which allows observation of the gunfire and indicating equipment which gives the range and bearing to targets, and own ship's course and speed, etc. If the control station is intended to serve as a substitute in the event of casualty to the director or plotting room, or to control auxiliary or secondary fire, it will contain some or all of the following equipment. An auxiliary computer, radar equipment, a stable element, or a stable element. We will learn later on how this equipment functions in secondary and auxiliary fire control. Yeah. The fire control stations continued. Here and throughout the rest of this section of instruction sheets, we will describe and refer to a fire control system which is typical of the main battery systems used aboard large Navy ships. This typical system has 2 fire control stations, each of which contains 1 an auxiliary computer, 2 periscopes, 3 bearing and range indicators, 4 a multi-turret train indicator, and various switches and signal lights. In addition, the aft control station contains a stable element and its control panel. The auxiliary computer is an auxiliary instrument for use in secondary or auxiliary fire. It is smaller, simpler, and less accurate than the rangekeeper, but can perform its major functions. The periscopes are used to locate and track targets and to observe the gunfire. The bearing and range indicators receive and indicate target range and bearing from the directors. The multiple turret train indicator shows whether or not the turrets are trained in accordance with gun train orders. A stable element in its control panel measures level and cross level and are used in secondary and auxiliary control. The typical main battery system we are considering uses 2 gun directors, one forward and one aft. The director is enclosed in a shield which supports the rangefinder and radar antenna. Each director is equipped to measure target range, bearing, and elevation, either optically or by means of radar, and to transmit these values to the rangekeeper. In addition, the director is equipped to take over some of the functions of the rangekeeper in stable vertical during auxiliary or secondary fire control. The directors also serve as lookout stations from which targets can be located and the fall of shot spotted. Aiming is the process of determining target bearing and elevation and may be performed by means of a sight telescope or by radar. The former is called optical aiming and the latter radar aiming. Ranging is the process of establishing the distance to the target from one's own ship, and be performed by means of the optical rangefinding, or by radar rangefinding. That's how that works. The director provides stations for a crew of 7 men within the shield. At the rear, the director are stations for the trainer, pointer, spotter, range reader, and rangefinder operator. At the front of the director are stations for the 2 sight setters. Each of these stations will be discussed on the following sheets. When optical aiming is being employed, the trainer sights for the trainer's sight and telescope and tracks the target by turning his hand wheels to bisect the target image of his telescope's vertical crosshair. Motion of his hand wheels turns the entire director and train and thus measures director-trained angle between the ship's center line and the director's line of sight. This angle is corrected for horizontal parallax by the horizontal parallax mechanism of the gun director and is continuously transmitted to the rangekeeper. During radar aiming, the trainer uses a radar indicator for tracking the target and measuring director train. The pointer sights through his sight telescope during optical aiming, turning his hand wheels to keep the target bisected by the horizontal crossline of his instrument. He thus continuously measures director elevation, which is corrected for vertical parallax and transmitted to the rangekeeper. For fire against surface targets, director elevation is small, and you will not consider it in subsequent discussions. The spotter occupies a position at the rear of the director, and through a hatch in the top of the director should he be able to put his head and shoulders outside the shield. From this position, he uses binoculars to observe the fall of shot and reports to the main battery plotting room on the accuracy of fire. Corrections are then made to gun settings to correct the errors. This procedure, as you know, is called spotting. The spotter also serves as a lookout for new, more susceptible targets. The rangefinder operator observes the target through the rangefinder, keeping the target properly positioned so that the range reader can read the range directly on the rangefinder scale. The range reader telephones the value of range to the plotting room at fixed intervals, every few seconds, where it is then fed into the rangekeeper. This is called intermittent optical ranging. The 2 sight setters units, one for sight angle and the other for sight deflection, are operated only in secondary or auxiliary fire control, at which time they receive on their indicators sight angle and sight deflection from the auxiliary computer or rangekeeper and relay this information to the sight telescopes. Shown below are the images seen by an observer using each of the optical instruments discussed. That's what it looks like. Let me take a sip. Two computing devices, the Trunnion tilt corrector and the director elevation corrector, are located in the lower part of the gun director. These devices are employed only during secondary and auxiliary fire control for the computation of gun train and elevation orders and supplied with director train level, cross-level sight angle, and sight deflection. In primary fire control, the computing devices are locked in their 0 positions. The director drive system is a combination electrical-mechanical mechanism used to position the director and train. The director can be trained by any one of the three methods: automatic power, local power, or manual. When automatic power drive is being used, the director drive motor positions the director automatically in response to an electric signal from the rangekeeper. This signal is the computed change in bearing required to keep the director continuously on the target. If during this type of control the trainer's telescope crossline tends to drift off the target, he turns his hand wheels to bring the director back on target and thus signals the plotting room that a revision of estimated target quantities is needed in the rangekeeper setup. In local power drive, the trainer's hand wheels directly control the electric drive motor. The rangekeeper in this case has no control over the positioning of the director. In manual drive, the trainer's hand wheels are connected through your clutch to the training worm. Oh, worm? And the director and shield are rotated solely by the power applied by the trainer to his hand wheels. Finger crack. Come on. Okay. Give me just a second. Ooh. Okay, we're gonna have about 16 more minutes, I think, fellas. Not a super long stream. The main battery plotting room is located within the ship's hull, below the waterline beneath the armored deck. This location ensures maximum protection against damage due to enemy action. Battleships usually have two main battery plotting rooms, one forward and one aft. Either of these plotting rooms can control any part or all of the main battery, and in an emergency, cross connections enable them to control secondary battery fire. Cruisers may have only one main battery plotting room which controls the fire of all the main battery guns. The arrangement and location of the equipment in main battery plotting rooms differ somewhat among the various types and sizes of ships. However, all main battery plotting rooms contain basically the same equipment, regardless of its location or arrangement. The principal items of equipment in the plotting room of the typical main battery system we have are being considered are these. Yeah. The plotting room is the primary source of gun training and elevation orders. To it, in primary fire control, come the data measured and estimated at the directors. From it go to the gun orders used to aim the guns. You already know of the function of the stable vertical in maintaining the true vertical and thus continuously measuring level and cross level, which are transmitted to the rangekeeper. This is the primary job of the stable vertical and has already been discussed. Another of its functions is the remote firing station. Its use as such depends on the method of aiming being employed: continuous aiming or selected level aiming. Continuous aiming is always used under normal sea conditions. Under the system of aiming, the gun train order and the gun elevation are continuously corrected for inclination of the deck. Thus, the guns always maintain their position in space and may be fired at any time, regardless of the roll and pitch of the ship. This method of operation is limited to use when the sea is relatively calm, requiring only minor corrections to gun orders to compensate for deck tilt. Selected level aiming is used when sea conditions make it difficult to keep the guns on target. Among Us beeps. The guns are not continuously stabilized, but move with the ship and can only be fired at the moment the aim is correct. Here's a selected level. So once you get to the right point and roll, the guns fire on their own. The stable vertical is provided with a pair of firing contacts wired in series with the firing circuit, and in parallel with a switch which can short the contacts. One of the contacts is fixed in space by the stable vertical's gyro, while the other moves with the ship. The contacts can be adjusted to close, and thus fire the guns automatically when the rest of the firing circuit is complete at any desired position of the ship's deck. These contacts are used during selected level aiming to automatically fire the guns at the instant in which they're used in the correct position. During continuous aiming, the guns are always kept stabilized by the target. Ooh. This just shows the circuit too. If you're an electrical engineer. During continuous aiming, the guns kept always stabilized on the target by continuously changing gun orders can be fired at any time. This is accomplished by closing the selector switch and thus shorting the automatic firing contacts. The guns are then fired by an operator at the stable vertical or at some other station. In continuous aiming, the stable vertical does not function as an automatic firing station. The Rangekeeper includes most of the controlling, computing, and transmitting fire control mechanisms for the main battery. The instrument is a combined Rangekeeper, bearing keeper, predictor, range tilt, deck tilt corrector, trunnion tilt corrector, and a graphic plotter. Supplied with the proper hand and automatic inputs, the Rangekeeper will compute, indicate, and transmit automatically to the turrets and range and directors the information necessary to point the guns and to train the directors continuously on the target. Gun orders, which are the outputs of the Rangekeeper, include the necessary corrections for drift, wind, variation in initial velocity, relative motion of ship and target, level, and cross level. The Rangekeeper is equipped with synchro transmitters and receivers, which are used to transmit and receive electrical inputs and outputs. The illustration below is a top view of a typical Rangekeeper showing the hand input cranks, the graphic plotter, and the various indicating devices incorporated in the Rangekeeper. Head scratch time. There's a Rangekeeper. You will see these on board battleships, museums, and cruiser museums. On the next sheet, we will see how the various inputs are normally introduced and their sources. Yeah, just skip this page. The indicating devices on top of the Rangekeeper give the Rangekeeper operator a glance at the value of hand inputs. Take your time and read this. They allow him to adjust these inputs in accordance with the information received by telephone from the source of the input by turning the hand crank till the proper value is shown on the indicator. A portion of the face of the Rangekeeper is illustrated below, showing the principal hand input cranks and their associated indicators. The graphic plotter, mentioned and illustrated on a previous sheet, automatically plots target position and records the rounds fired. It thus provides a permanent record of the combat action, which is invaluable for post-firing analysis. The graphic plotter is no longer used to solve the fire control problem during combat. Units of the radar equipment used with the antenna mounted on top of the director are located in the plotting room. When radar ranging and aiming is being used, range measurement is controlled by the radar range operator in the plotting room, who operates the radar range unit. From this unit, range is transmitted to the Rangekeeper. The director trainer has a radar indicator at his station in the director, which enables him to measure director train during radar aiming. This information is then transmitted to the Rangekeeper in the same manner as during optical aiming. As you know, the fire control radar is used at night and whenever visibility conditions are poor. In addition, however, radar ranging is often used when optical ranging could be employed due to its greater accuracy and the fact that it allows continuous range measurement. You will learn more about the use of radar in fire control in a later section. The main battery fire control switchboard, located in the plotting room, consists of rotary switches, a fuse panel, and a snap switch panel from the interior communications circuits. The switchboard serves as a central point from which signals can be switched to and from the various elements of the fire control system as required for operation in different methods of fire control. In other words, the switchboard selects the proper route for the transmission of quantities within the system during primary, secondary, or auxiliary fire control. The plotting room also contains a multiple turret train indicator similar to that in the control stations, which shows whether or not the turrets are trained in accordance with gun orders. A bearing indicator shows target bearing and own ship's course. A director train indicator shows the train angles of the directors. The dead reckoning tracer is a device which plots own ship's course and is used during shore bombardment operations. Numerous signal lights, dials, buzzers, and telephones and other equipment provide means for interior communications between the plotting room and other fire control stations. The turrets. Fire control equipment installed in the gun turrets includes devices which elevate and train the guns automatically in response to gun orders from the Rangekeeper, as well as equipment which enables the guns to be operated independently of the Rangekeeper and director in local fire control. The principal fire control equipment in a typical main battery gun turret is shown in the illustration below. The elevating and traversing mechanisms serve as the links between fire control and gunnery by positioning the guns in elevation and train in accordance with the gun orders. Yeah. Are you enjoying the stream? A fun little diagram. I believe this is a 8-inch turret, a triple turret, like on the Baltimore class. Under normal combat conditions, when the aiming of the turret's guns is being controlled by the gun director, gun orders are transmitted directly from the rangekeeper to the elevating and traversing mechanisms in the turrets, and the guns are automatically positioned. In this method of operation, some units of the turret fire control equipment are inoperative, and others serve to check the director's aiming and range finding and ranging. On the following sheet, we will discuss the various pieces of fire control equipment within the turrets and see what their functions are. Each turret is commanded by a turret officer who occupies a booth at the rear of the turret. The booth is equipped with a periscope which enables the turret officer to observe the target, estimate its course and speed, and spot the fall of a shot. An auxiliary computer in the turret's officer booth is used instead of the rangekeeper to solve the fire control problem in local fire control. Like the computer located in this control station is smaller, simpler, and less accurate than the rangekeeper, is intended only for emergency use. Many gun turrets contain their own radar equipment, the antenna being mounted on top of the turret. This equipment is used to check director, determine range and bearing in primary and secondary control. It is used instead of the optical equipment in local control. The optical equipment listed below is used only as a standby in case of failure of the radar system. The rangefinder mounted at the rear of the turret officer's booth provides a means for checking the range determined by the gun director in primary and auxiliary fire control. It is used in local fire control to supply range to the turret's auxiliary computer. The trainer and pointer sight telescopes are located at the front of the turret. There are 3 pointers telescopes, one for each gun, since the guns are controlled independently in elevation. Only one trainer's sight telescope is required, however, because all guns move together in train. The pointers and trainer sights are used to aim the guns in local control and to check the gun director's aim and other methods of control. The checker's telescope on the extreme left side of the turret is used to check the accuracy of the sight telescope settings. When the guns are not positioned by direct gun orders from the rangekeeper to the elevating and traversing mechanisms, automatically the gun orders are transmitted via the sight setters indicator to the gun elevation and train indicators. These instruments show the required gun settings on one dial and the actual position of the gun on another dial. The trainer and pointers then turn their hand wheels which actuate the elevating and traversing mechanisms until the readings on the 2 dials coincide. Hand drive cranks are provided so that guns can be positioned manually in the event of a power failure. In addition to the equipment already mentioned, the turret officer's booth contains a multiple turret train indicator and various switches and signal lights. Ooh. Here's another diagram. I feel lightheaded from all this reading, bros. Oh. Oh. The turret equipment makes possible several methods of laying the guns in elevation and train. These methods are 1. Automatic gun laying, 2. Indicator gun laying, and 3. Local gun laying. The first 2 methods may be used in either primary, secondary, or auxiliary fire control, while the third method is only used during local control. In automatic gun laying, the gun orders are transmitted from the rangekeeper or control station auxiliary computer to the elevating and traversing mechanisms. During indicator gun laying, the gun orders positions the gun train and elevation indicators, and the trainer and pointer's hand wheels are turned to lay the guns and match indicator dials, as explained on the preceding sheet. You will recall that sight angle and sight deflection are the angles for which a gun must be elevated and trained away from the line of sight to correct for drift, wind, range, and etc. These turrets are introduced into the sight telescopes and local gun laying. The hand wheels are then turned to lay the guns and bring the sights on target. Now let's go on to learn about the various methods of fire control system operation. I'm going to copy this, and I think we're going to just Control C. Let's cut this music out now. I think we're gonna. Ooh, it's hard to breathe almost. Been reading for so long. Okay, I think we're gonna cut it here, fellas. We're gonna have to figure out who to raid. We're gonna have to figure out who to raid. So let's mute these so I can get my audio going and I don't put myself in a loop. Who is live? Who is live? So many friends live. Oh, so many friends live. I think tonight we're going to raid. Are any of these people like in a VC or something? Yes. This one is. Um, we will raid. Um, um, I'm gonna raid my good pal Callie Calico. She deserves a raid. Our raid message is here's our raid message if you're subbed. The World Souffle subscribers get access to free incredible emotes. Ain't that something else? I hope you guys enjoyed me going lightheaded from talking for 2 hours. We're gonna have to come back to this another time. Probably got like 3 more streams that I can like squeeze out of this text. I hope you all have a fantastic night and a great rest of the week. Good. I'm waiting for my ad to go away. Is this One Direction? All right. Have a fantastic evening.